In the basement archives of Millbrook County's courthouse, a clerk named Patricia Henley found something that made her vomit into a wastebasket. It was March 1994, and she'd been tasked with digitizing marriage records dating back to 1847. The ledger page bore 3 entries in faded brown ink, 3 marriages, all involving the same woman, Constance Aldrich, age 21, wed to Thomas Aldrich, age 53, on September 12, 1871. The second entry showed Constance Aldrich, age 23, wed to Samuel Aldrich, age 19, on October 4, 1873. The third made Patricia's hands shake. Constance Aldrich, age 25, wed to Benjamin Aldrich, age 3. Someone had scratched through that last line with a penknife, gouging the paper until it nearly tore. In the margin, a different hand had scrawled, "Lord forgive us, she married her own son." The coroner's ledger from 1876 showed matching jaw fractures in both Constance and Benjamin Aldrich. Same distinctive break pattern, same unusual bone density. The handwriting grew increasingly erratic as Dr. Matthias Wells documented case after case of impossible anatomical concordance within the Aldrich line. This is the story America buried for over a century. The files were sealed in 1948, marked Public Safety, Indefinite Classification. What you're about to hear comes from documents quietly declassified in 1998, their pages bleeding black ink where censors worked overtime to hide the truth. When the quiet answers, the bride returns. Subscribe, so these files don't disappear again. Thornwick Valley cuts through the Appalachian foothills like a wound that won't heal. The fog rolls in thick every evening, pooling between ridges until morning light burns it off in spirals. Local surveyors noted something peculiar in their field books. Compasses spin wildly near the valley floor, and property lines drawn on paper never match what boots find in the woods. The paths bend back on themselves. Walk north for an hour, and you'll find your own footprints coming from the south. The paper fails you here, but memory hardens like scar tissue. Every resident knows the rules without being taught them. Don't follow voices after dark. Don't trust mirrors that show more than they should. And never, ever disturb the spiral patterns you'll find carved into oak bark throughout the valley. State geological surveys from the 1930s describe Thornwick as hydrologically impossible. Water flows uphill in 17 documented locations, and the bedrock formations suggest the valley was carved from the inside out. The official reports end there, but surveyors' personal notes tell a different story. They write about whispers that seem to rise from the ground itself, guiding their instruments toward discoveries they didn't want to make. Dr. Samuel Morrison, who conducted the 1932 mineral survey, wrote in his private journal, "The stones remember. Each one holds an echo. Walk carefully here. This place listens." The Aldrich family arrived in Thornwick Valley in 1847, bringing with them a carved applewood ring that bore no discernible markings, yet felt familiar to everyone who touched it. Town records describe Thomas Aldrich as a gentleman of particular conviction who purchased 400 acres of valley land for a price that made the county clerk suspicious. Payment was made in Spanish silver, coins that bore dates from the future, 1849, 1851, 1853. Thomas brought his young wife Constance, his teenage son Samuel, and an infant named Benjamin. Neighbors reported hearing laughter from the Aldrich homestead at all hours, not joyful laughter, but the kind that overlaps itself, creating harmonies that human voices shouldn't be able to make. Reverend Marcus Stone, who ministered to Thornwick's small congregation, wrote extensively about the Aldrich family in his personal notes. His handwriting starts clear and confident, but degenerates over months into desperate scratches. They speak the old words, words that pull at the mind like fishhooks. When the quiet answers, the bride returns. Mrs. Aldrich says it every Sunday after service, always with that ring pressed to her lips. The Reverend's final entry, dated October 1871, reads simply, The vow has been spoken. God help us all. What the Aldriches practiced defied both law and nature, yet it followed a logic that became clearer with each generation. They called it the doctrine of return, a belief system centered on the idea that certain bloodlines could fold back upon themselves, creating patterns that transcended ordinary human limitation. Town seamstresses reported that Constance Aldrich's quilts bore geometric designs that hurt to look at directly. The spirals seemed to move when viewed peripherally, drawing the eye inward until watchers felt dizzy. Children who glimpsed these patterns reported dreams of walking through endless how, always that led back to themselves. The family kept meticulous records in leather-bound ledgers. Each page documented not just births and deaths, but measurements, observations, and carefully tracked convergences. Dr. Edmund Hollis, the Valley's physician from 1868 to 1891, gained access to these ledgers after treating the family for various ailments. His medical journal describes pages covered in genealogical charts that loop back on themselves, creating closed circles where parents became children and children became parents. One page, according to Dr. Hollis, contained a drawing that made him nauseous. An applewood spiral, with mathematical notations scrawled around its edges. The calculations suggested impossibilities, gestation periods that lasted 14 months, birth weights that defied infant anatomy, and something Hollis referred to only as the architectural imperative. His final note about the Aldrich ledgers: they are not documenting their family tree. They are following a blueprint. The Aldrich homestead grew without construction crews. Neighbors swore the building expanded overnight, adding rooms and corridors that led to more rooms and corridors. Windows faced other windows across impossibly narrow courtyards. Hallways branched and merged until visitors found themselves walking in circles they hadn't noticed entering. The well behind the house widened as it deepened. County Assessor James Murphy documented this phenomenon in his 1889 report, noting that the well's diameter increased by precisely 6 inches with every foot of depth. By the time Murphy abandoned his survey, the well measured nearly 20 feet across at a depth of 47 feet. Fire Assessor William Crane attempted to map the house's interior in 1903 after a minor kitchen blaze. His report, preserved in the county fire department's files, contains floor plans that make no architectural sense. Rooms exist within other rooms. Staircases lead to themselves. Crane's handwritten memo on the final page reads, "Every wall refuses plumb, by design. This structure was built according to principles that predate conventional geometry." Crane never finished his assessment. His tools, compass, square, plumb line, all malfunctioned inside the house. His final notation: "The building corrects my measurements. It knows what it wants to be." In April 1874, Thomas Aldrich sent a letter to Dr. Jonathan Whitmore, a physician practicing in Charleston, who specialized in unusual obstetric presentations. The letter arrived sealed with an impression of the applewood ring pressed into dark wax that cracked like dried blood when Whitmore broke it open. The letter contained no details, only an address and a single line. "When the quiet answers, the bride returns. Your expertise in difficult births is required." Dr. Whitmore's journal documents his journey to Thornwick Valley and his first encounter with it, the Aldrich family. His initial entries describe normal medical consultations. Constance Aldrich was pregnant with what would become her final child, and the pregnancy showed unusual characteristics that concerned the family. But Whitmore's tone shifts dramatically after his first night in the Aldrich house. His handwriting becomes erratic as he describes discovering paired portraits of family members who looked identical despite being separated by generations. Dolls made from applewood scraps lined the hallways, each one carved with the same face appearing at different ages. In the cellar, Whitmore found a chapel arranged in concentric circles with benches facing a carved spiral set into the stone floor. His journal entry from April 30th, 1874, ends mid-sentence. "The child she carries is not." The next 17 pages have been carefully cut from the journal with a sharp blade. By November 1874, Constance Aldrich had been pregnant for 14 months. Her condition deteriorated in ways that challenged Dr. Whitmore's medical training. Her skin became translucent, showing vein patterns that seemed to shift when observed directly. The usual monitoring methods failed. Stethoscopes picked up rhythms that matched no known heartbeat pattern, and the pregnancy showed measurements that violated basic human anatomy. Whitmore's journal describes late-night observations that left him questioning his sanity. The patient's eyes would change color hour by hour, cycling through shades that had no names. Family members spoke to her abdomen in whispered conversations, calling the unborn child by multiple names that changed, depending on who was speaking. Most disturbing were the sounds. Whitmore documented harmonic vibrations emanating from the womb that register on my instruments as overlapping frequencies, as if multiple voices were humming in unison from within. Nurses reported hearing whispered responses when they placed their ears against Constance's belly. The family treated these phenomena as normal, even blessed. When Whitmore expressed concern, Thomas Aldrich touched the applewood ring and smiled. "She has returned to us before, Doctor. She returns now through her son's love." December 15th, 1874. 3 doctors attended the birth. Whitmore, the local physician Dr. Hollis, and a midwife named Sarah Blackwell, who had delivered over 300 children without losing mother or infant. All 3 left the room before the delivery concluded. Dr. Hollis never practiced medicine again. The child emerged with characteristics that violated human development. Its skull was oversized and translucent, allowing observers to see separate brain lobes pulsing at different rhythms. The cranium split along natural suture lines during delivery, revealing pink tissue beneath. Multiple fingers extended from each hand in spiral arrangements, some bearing split nail beds that bled fresh. Limbs emerged at anatomically impossible angles, fused like twisted vines, until the birth process forced separation. The seams tore audibly, leaving raw tissue exposed. Most unsettling were the eyes, multiple sets that moved independently, tracking different objects, while vitreous fluid leaked down the infant's chi, K's in clear streams. Dr. Whitmore's medical notes, discovered in his estate papers decades later, describe overlapping facial features that suggested genetic convergence beyond natural possibility. The delivery room floor was flooded with blood-tinged amniotic fluid that formed spiral patterns as it pooled between floorboards. 6 hours after birth, the infant was found arranged in a perfect spiral on its blanket, surrounded by a thin, dark arc that appeared to be smeared placental tissue. Sarah Blackwell, the experienced midwife, was discovered in the hallway, catatonic, her apron stained with handprints that showed too many fingers. The child lived for exactly 6 days. During this time, it exhibited behaviors that challenged every witness's understanding of infant development. Instead of crying, it produced harmonic vibrations that registered on Dr. Whitmore's instruments as layered frequencies. Pink froth bubbled at its lips when it attempted vocalizations, creating sounds like overlapping static. Most disturbing was its apparent recognition of family members. The infant's multiple eyes would track different relatives simultaneously, and its excess fingers would curl in recognition when specific voices spoke. Family members took turns sitting beside the cradle, performing rituals that Whitmore could not bring himself to document in detail. Dr. Hollis, before his breakdown, noted that the child's vital signs created impossible readings. Heart rate, respiration, and brain activity all showed patterns that suggested multiple overlapping life signs. The monitors, when connected, produced audio feedback that nurses described as whispering. Reverend Stone was summoned to provide last rites, but he fled after seeing the infant. His diary entry from December 20th reads, "This is not God's work. This is something older, something that bends nature back upon itself until it screams." On the 6th day, the child stopped breathing. Its multiple eyes remained open, each set focused on a different point in the room, until they slowly clouded over in sequence. Unmarked sedans arrived in Thornwick Valley on December 22nd, 1874, exactly 1 day after the infant's death. Men in dark suits identifying themselves only as representatives of the centre seized the body, all medical records, hospital equipment, and Dr. Whitmore's journal. The birth certificate was replaced with a document listing cause of death as multiple congenital anomalies. Sarah Blackwell, the midwife, was taken to a facility outside Charleston for observation and treatment. She returned 3 months later with no memory of the birth and a legal document forbidding her from discussing her time with the Aldrich family. Dr. Hollis received a similar order before retiring from medicine entirely. The infant's body was reportedly incinerated at a federal facility, though local rumors persisted that the remains were preserved for study. Government files from this period remain classified, but a clerical error in 1923 briefly revealed that the case was categorized under biological anomalies, national security concern. Dr. Whitmore's practice was quietly shuttered, and he left Charleston permanently. His final letter to his medical colleague, Dr. Francis Morton, contained only one line: "Some knowledge cannot be safely possessed. Forget my name." 3 years after the federal seizure, an orphan arrived in Thornwick Valley. The child, approximately 8 years old, bore a distinctive scar around one finger, where a ring might have been forcibly removed. Local families noted that the child's voice contained 2 distinct tones when speaking, and it refused to sleep under any roof, preferring to shelter in forest clearings. The orphan carved spiral patterns into tree bark throughout the valley, always using the same counterclockwise motion. These carvings appeared on barn doors, fence posts, and church walls, despite no one witnessing the child making them. Each spiral was accompanied by painted symbols that resembled letters from an unknown alphabet. In 1934, County Surveyor Malcolm Reed was commissioned to map property boundaries in Thornwick Valley for a proposed railroad route. His field notes document the discovery of stone steps carved directly into a hillside, forming a spiral staircase that descended far below ground level. Reed followed the stairs down 47 steps before reaching a circular chamber. His survey equipment registered impossible acoustic properties. Whispers echoed for minutes, and his voice returned altered, speaking words he hadn't said. Carved into the chamber's walls were portraits that matched faces from old Aldrich family photographs. At the chamber's center, Reed found an applewood ring bearing the initial C. His report ends abruptly mid-sentence. "The ring fits my finger perfectly, though I have never." Reed submitted his resignation the following day and left the county permanently. His survey equipment was found abandoned in the chamber, along with a spiral pattern smeared onto the stone floor in what appeared to be blood. Dr. Margaret Thorne, a folklorist from Marshall University, arrived in Thornwick Valley in 1976 to research Appalachian family traditions. Her academic interest quickly shifted to the Aldrich case after discovering patterns in local birth records, property deeds, and disappearance reports that formed a perfect spiral when plotted on topographical maps. Thorne gained access to microfilm records that had escaped federal seizure, including church registries, business ledgers, and personal correspondence. Her research notes describe finding evidence of intentional multi-generational experimentation by unknown parties seeking to achieve biological convergence through systematic bloodline manipulation. Her findings were presented to the University Review Board in March 1977. The presentation lasted exactly 17 minutes before Thorne was dismissed from her position. Her research materials disappeared from university archives that same night. Thorne left academia permanently and withdrew to a cabin in rural Wyoming. Her final communication was a postcard sent to her former department head. "The spiral closes itself. Some patterns cannot be broken from within." Skeptics point to mundane explanations: genetic disorders, primitive medical understanding, and the tendency of isolated communities to develop unusual traditions. Marriage records can be falsified, birth defects misunderstood, and official documents altered by time and handling, but paper burns and memory survives. Every attempt to rationalize the Aldrich case fails when confronted with the physical evidence: spiral carvings that appear overnight, bloodstains that grow despite cleaning, and the persistent reports of voices that speak in harmonies no single human throat can produce. The federal files remain sealed, their contents protected by classification levels that suggest ongoing concern. What little information escaped redaction indicates that the Aldrich case was not unique. Similar patterns have been documented in 17 other locations across North America, each involving families whose names have been systematically erased from public records. Today, Thornwick Valley remains sparsely populated. Satellite imagery shows property lines that shift between surveys, and GPS systems malfunction consistently in the area. The Aldrich homestead burned in 1899, but its foundation stones were arranged in a spiral pattern that local contractors refused to disturb. Real estate listings for valley properties remain on the market for decades without selling. Prospective buyers report feeling unwelcome, hearing whispered warnings, and discovering carved spirals on their car windshields after viewing tours. The applewood ring has never been found, though reports persist of travelers discovering wooden rings in forest clearings throughout Appalachia. Each ring bears the same smooth finish and the same peculiar warmth, as if recently worn by living flesh. In 1998, the partially declassified federal files contained one legible paragraph: biological anomalies consistent with intentional genetic convergence. Recommend indefinite monitoring of bloodline descendants. Pattern suggests cyclical recurrence at generational intervals. Public safety requires continued classification. The rest remains black. When the quiet answers, the bride has returned. Just told. He returns through blood, through memory, through the spiral that closes upon itself until past and future become indistinguishable. The Aldrich name may be buried, but the pattern they followed, the terrible mathematics of bloodlines that bend back upon themselves, continues its work in valleys where fog pools thick and compasses spin without direction. Some knowledge carves itself into the land itself, waiting for the next family foolish enough to believe they can control what they summon. The wooden ring is still out there, smooth and warm, ready to press its impression into fresh wax. Which valley will answer next? Drop your thoughts below, and if you've encountered spiral patterns in your own research, tell us about it. Vote for the next sealed case you want us to expose: the Michigan lighthouse keeper who aged backward, or the Texas oil family who discovered something ancient beneath their land. The files are waiting.